Hey folks, Jeff from Corrugated Cavalier here. So I've been having some conversations both in person and online on my Discord server around the counter in Fiore's spear section because, you know, that's just how we nerd out around here. And the discussion has come around whether the counter is more of a strike or a thrust. So the short answer, in my opinion at least, is yes. It's either, depending on a couple of factors. But I want to go into three things that might influence our interpretation. So the first is whether or not the butt of the spear, or pedale, is sharp or not. The second is the context in which this spear fighting is occurring in. And third is perhaps the most salient point, which is more just about measure and actual application. So on the first point of whether the butt or pedale is sharp or not, it's totally impossible to tell for sure. However, Fiore does say in the spear section, when he's talking about the counter, that the butt is shod in well-tempered iron, just as the point. Now, he doesn't say that it is sharp specifically. There are some images that I believe kind of suggest that it is, and I'll put a couple up here. Honestly, most of the images don't look this way, but there are definitely some that do suggest that it's sharp. He also uses the same phrase in the Giavarina section on the mounted versus spear section, and where pretty much the same counter exists, and the back spike is more clearly drawn in that and more consistently. So I think we have to at least consider it a possibility that the back spike was sharp, or that maybe it was sometimes. Now, I also think whether or not it's sharp doesn't necessarily completely matter. This will still be effective if you get this into gaps, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So the context of the spear section in Fiore here is more like knightly combat, whether it's a duel or it could be a less formal circumstance. We're not really sure, but it is spear in armor, okay? So this is not like fighting in a line with infantry folks where if you did have a back spike, it might be not such a good thing to like hit people behind you. Fiore also says in this section in a few different places, at least in the Porta di Freddo guards for sure, that I wait with my lance shortened instead of extended, and the pictures make it look like you're more holding it at the middle, because he believes it's more deceptive. So that's the context for this. It is armored spear, and he is using it in a little bit more of a close fighting system. Of course, a spear still has more range when holding it shortened than a sword does, but yeah, that's the context of this. Now, I was saying I don't think it really matters whether the back spike or pedale or butt is sharp or not. And I think that some people personally actually think a little too much and make too big of a deal out of going all the way through mail and gambeson in one strike and killing the person in one blow. If you stab them in the face, like Fiore shows in the manual, if you get them in the face, of course that can end the fight. Just seeing with my mail and a thin layer of garment underneath it, the amount of force that it took with a downward hammer strike with a dagger to even get through it a little bit, I don't think that it will be that easy, even with the main spearhead, even if both people are two armored knights are moving at each other, even if you do get it in a gap and you're trying to go through mail, I don't think it would be that easy to have a fight-ending strike. So a lot of times what's best about getting into a gap is then you get some purchase on your opponents, and you can manipulate them, possibly topple them over, and things like that. It doesn't have to be an immediate killing strike. Now, Fiore doesn't really talk about this, but this is just from my experience in armored fighting. Once you're controlling somebody, there's a lot of things you can do to them there. If you break their structure, that's usually where we call a point. And I can tell you for certain that finding gaps when both people are standing and moving around is not that easy. So if you can take somebody to the ground if you want to dispatch them, to me, in my limited experience, that seems like the best way. Some sources bear that out as well. I think a lot of grappling and taking people to ground in armor. Anyways, that's the context for this. I don't think it necessarily needs to be sharp to be effective as a thrust on the back spike. Now, this third point is more about the measure at which this happens, and I think that this is really critical. I don't think that Fiore is saying specifically one way or the other whether it's a thrust or a strike. At least in the Getty, the verb he uses is actually ferisco, which really just means to hurt or wound, and this came about in some discussion on my Discord server as well. So sometimes it is, in this section, it's translated as strike, and so sometimes our English translations can influence interpretation as well. So it's a very general term. So to me, that also points out even more so that it really depends on the measure. So I'm going to do a couple of examples here. So it's the counter. So if I'm the one thrusting and it gets beaten aside, I still have plenty of room to get in the point. Even if I choke up more, kind of like Fiore shows, if I thrust and it's beaten aside, I still have time to get it in. I missed a little bit there, but you can see that I still have the time. I can put it up here. That was a little bit short, so I'm going to get to that in a second. But this still, if you wanted to get the point in, and you're this choked up, I'm very choked up. So if I thrust here, it's still step back, and as long as you get structured, you should be just fine. I think most people would still hold it something a little closer to this, so it's not hard, really, to get that point in, even if you're stepping forward. Now, your opponent very well could be moving forward as well. So if I thrust here, I'm stepping forward and my opponent's stepping forward. Yeah, I might be clubbing them with the back end of the spear instead. And I think this is totally valid as well. You're going to have to do something else after this. But there are a lot of sword and armor plays that kind of come in with a pommel strike and then move to a takedown or something like that. So once again, I think it can totally be either. So my thrust is through, gets displaced. I still have time to get this point in. And as you can see on Paul, I can really still get structure in this way. I'm moving a pole that's actually firmly rooted in the ground. Or up here, as I'll put up a picture there. And but if measure breaks down more quickly when your thrust is put off, of course, you may come around to the back end and strike. I've done both, and I think that both are totally valid in this system. That's just my take on it. But I do think that the counter being thrust is an option and is totally valid. I hope you guys thought that that was interesting. Feel free to comment and give your own opinion below. I think it's an interesting discussion either way. Thank you all for coming by the channel. I'm almost at 300 subscribers. I have a Discord channel as well. I'm not going to put it up here. If you can get a hold of me some other way and you want to be on it, just let me know. There's a lot of armor, HEMA, and also some reenactment stuff that people post, and it's overall just a good time. Yeah, once again, thanks for coming by the channel. Like, subscribe, get a conversation around this going down below. Be good to each other, and ciao.